I'm delighted to introduce Edith Hammer. She is a great person that works at a project that I think is extremely important for the whole world, but as well for us. She works at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. And it wants everyone to have access to education throughout their lives. And of course, outreach and astronomy is very important for people so they broaden their horizons. Edith, thank you so much for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Giulietta. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very pleased to introduce the concept of lifelong learning to those who have not heard about it, and to maybe add some new notions to those who do know about it, and to also share a little bit of the work of our institute. I will share my screen and start the presentation. So maybe you can just confirm if you can see the presentation?
I can, Edith.
Okay. Yeah, so, well, as a presenter, I probably come from a slightly or very different field of work and discipline than most of the participants of the conference. My educational background is actually media studies, but I've been working in the field of education now for many years, and I've been with the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning for 4 years. And as some of you may not be familiar with our institute, I would like to take just half a minute to introduce it. We are the dedicated unit within UNESCO and also the UN family with a mandate to work on the topic of lifelong learning. We promote lifelong learning, particularly with a focus on adult education and continuing education, but also literacy and non-formal basic education. And in particular, we also look at disadvantaged and vulnerable groups to ensure that we can achieve higher equity in education and also higher social equity, and to make sure that those often excluded groups from education can be included in learning processes in whatever way and in whatever life context possible. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I hope that what I will share, this vision of lifelong learning and how it can be implemented also through the roles of universities will be of interest.
Edith, can you put your presentation in presentation mode, please? Perfect.
Does it work now? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So what I will present today is built on a consultation process. In spring this year, we invited 12 experts, professors mainly from all over the world and from different disciplines. And we invited them to discuss with us what can be the future of education and lifelong learning. What do we envision for the year 2050 on how learning processes will take place within society? And one of those distinguished experts was Giulietta. So it's a very nice opportunity to meet again. And this consultation led to an outcomes report, which is called Embracing a Culture of Lifelong Learning. And it has been submitted to an international commission, which will develop an international report of the Futures of Education initiative. So our consultation process on lifelong learning was part of a larger UNESCO initiative, which will lead to a report by the end of next year. So I've already mentioned a few times now the concept of lifelong learning, and I would just like as an introduction to give a brief definition of what this entails. We see lifelong learning as deeply rooted in the integration of learning and living. So it is really a life-wide process, and it includes all people of all ages. So people with all kinds of social backgrounds and from from birth to old age. Importantly, lifelong learning takes place in all life contexts, not only in schools or formal education institutions, but also learning takes place within families, within neighborhoods, within local communities and the workplace, and many more contexts. And there is a variety of learning modalities. We distinguish usually formal, non-formal, and informal learning, which also somehow relates to learning cautiously or towards a degree in a particular education structure, or even learning when we don't even notice that we are learning. This now can further entail learning face-to-face with others, or learning in a digital mode, which has increased a lot in the last month. So learning can meet a lot of different demands and needs and purposes. It is not only for career development. Learning really is also for personal growth. We see learning as a way to also enjoy leisure time. And this sometimes becomes more important for people at older age, maybe because the pressure of learning for a career then is not so strong anymore. So during this consultation process, we or the experts developed a vision of how they see lifelong learning in the year 2050. And there are some key principles that were identified. First of all, it's the learner's autonomy, which means that learners should really be in the driving seat of their learning processes. They should be the ones building their learning biographies, and have a very active role in the learning processes, choose what they want to learn, and receive the support they need to be autonomous learners. Importantly, learning is a collective process. We may not always see this when we study for an exam by ourselves, but we see, particularly in the context of lifelong learning, that it takes place in peer groups, that it takes place in families, as I mentioned. Importantly, across generations. This helps to include also older people in learning processes, but also helps sharing knowledge across generations, which may otherwise also get lost. This learning ecosystem that we envisage involves online learning, offline learning, all kinds of let's say real life experiential learning, or technology enhanced learning in different contexts. We importantly want to see learning in the year 2050 of being inclusive, of being available to people of all backgrounds, and that means also to make available learning spaces, physical spaces in cities or villages, spaces that maybe were not dedicated or built or created as learning spaces, but we can reinvent them as learning spaces. There are examples already, for example, of learning initiatives taking place in shopping centers, because this is where people spend time, and then why not meet them where they are. Yeah, we need to move away from a very school-centered learning or education system to really broaden this view, to include these spaces also in a policy dialogue. And last, but probably most important, we really want to push to see lifelong learning as a human right. Education is a human right. It is often reduced to basic education in schools, but we think that particularly in times of large-scale changes and societal challenges and transformations in society, lifelong learning shall be established as a human right because it will increase in importance. And to make this vision a reality, the experts together with us have identified 10 key messages that were accompanied with action points. And these 10 key messages should help to push for this vision. I will only focus on 3 of them today. And these are the 3 that I see particularly related to the field of higher education and universities. Of course, all of them are interrelated in a way, and all of them are also somehow related to the field of higher education. But I think these three are particularly relevant. So it's about recognizing the holistic character of lifelong learning, establishing lifelong learning as a common good, and transforming schools and universities into lifelong learning institutions. When we talk about transforming universities, there has been in the last decades, I would say, a call to change or extend the mandate of universities beyond their core missions of teaching and research to really go into outreach activities, science communication, and further beyond that to also reach out to non-traditional students. 20 years ago, the traditional student was still 18 to 25 years old, but we can really see that with societies changing, also the typical students are changing, and universities are asked to develop programs and offers for a much more diverse studentship. So universities are expected to fulfill new roles within society, and we will now look into these three key messages that I pointed out to see how they can actually do that. One important point within this transformation process is the revision of curricula. This means that we need more flexibility in study programs, also in terms of learning formats and alternatives to full degree programs, meaning more flexibility in terms of stackable credits to ensure students can navigate more flexibly through their studies. Importantly, pedagogies need to be transformed more from what to learn to why and how to learn, to ensure a high relevance of learning contents to students. This also means to better contextualize the knowledge that is taught and learned to the prior knowledge and experience of students. Of course, this is quite challenging, also considering a more diverse studentship. This new pedagogies would also include the principle of epistemic pluralism, meaning that we can accept that there are diverse perspectives and diverse knowledge, and to rather foster a critical and explorative attitude in students than teaching the truth, which I guess depends a bit also on the disciplines. There is, of course, some facts and figures that cannot have different perspectives so much, but particularly when it comes to social issues and cultural issues, this becomes even more important. And the third point is to open up to the community. I think we have heard very nice examples in the previous session of initiatives that open up to the community, such as the project where astronomers go to hospitals to share and support learning. So this means that also learning resources need to be available openly and freely, and that outreach activities are undertaken by universities to also share the results of their knowledge. Recognizing the holistic character of lifelong learning, I already indicated that in the definition of what we understand as lifelong learning. It means that learners shall be able to navigate their own learning pathways, and universities shall provide them with the let's say, mechanisms and frameworks to do so, and importantly also with the information and guidance services, so they can build their own learning biographies. This is also related to ensuring that the outcomes of non-formal or informal learning can be recognized in formal institutions. and that we increasingly open up the boundaries between different formal, non-formal, and informal ways of learning, so to allow for more flexibility in the education system. And the last point that I mentioned, the last key message that relates to higher education, is to establish lifelong learning as a common good. This refers to understanding the process of knowledge production and knowledge sharing as a truly collaborative process. And that it involves the communities that are addressed. This means not to do research about certain social groups and subjects, but to do research with them. There is this kind of saying, nothing about us without us. So to have this kind of engaged research principles. Establishing lifelong learning as a common good also means to link practical and community-based knowledge to academic knowledge, to find solutions to social problems. This has been very relevant in the last months. Universities played a major role in dealing with the challenges of COVID-19, not only in research related to finding a vaccine or in public health issues, but very much related to the also social issues that arise from the COVID-19 crisis. And engaged research can really help to find targeted solutions for local communities that are affected. This is also about democratizing knowledge production, acknowledging the value of different kinds of knowledge. This relates to indigenous knowledge, knowledge of linguistic minorities, or also acknowledging that there is a Western dominance of knowledge production, and that we need to include stronger knowledge that is produced in the global south, and to achieve a more openness in that sense. And last, to establish an educational commons and open science to make available research results, which is, I think, easier now with the possibilities that we have with online communication. But of course, it needs policies for open educational resources and the publishing of original research data. I would like to share one example, just to add one example to the many good examples of outreach and lifelong learning initiatives that were mentioned during the conference. Also, I saw there was a session on Thursday about innovation in education, and I looked through the posters that were presented, provided online, and I was quite fascinated by the astro camps that were presented there. I found that a very nice initiative. And one way of a quite institutional... Yeah, that will work. Thank you very much. One project that has been around for, I think, now 22 years and is quite institutionalized is called University Meets Public. It is from my home university, from the University of Vienna. And in Vienna, the main universities work together with the adult education centers in the city. They're called folk high schools and have a very long tradition in the country. And this initiative really aims to share research results and make them available to the Viennese people. And every semester, around 300 public lectures are offered by researchers and scientists. They are at a very low fee. People can also buy a science card for 30 euros and then basically attend all the lectures in that semester. It has been very popular throughout the years. It attracts probably mainly or the studentship is rather older than the students that are at the university. So it's really also a way to include older learners in learning processes. Now with COVID-19, they moved most of the lectures online, offering them through webinars. And I checked the schedule this week, and they actually also have a lot of lectures on astronomy, which are mostly offered together with the planetarium in Vienna. So I think it's just one initiative. Of course, there are very many different ways, but this has been quite successful over the years. So to sum up, what can universities do to embrace a culture of lifelong learning? We see that universities are crucial to embrace a culture of lifelong learning within the institution, but also to reach out and really start a transformation within society. Well, I've mentioned some key points like working on curricula, on pedagogies, ensuring flexible learning pathways, supporting the co-creation of knowledge, being open, not only in terms of access, but also in terms of tolerance of different kinds of knowledge. And while promoting research that is with the community and for the community. And I think, that higher education can really be a key player in embracing such culture of lifelong learning. And I thank you very much. And I hope you could take something with you from the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edith, for your presentation. I would like to open the floor to questions and answers. When we get more questions, I will forward them to you. But in the meantime, I would like to know if you have a platform in order to socialize all these things you have been doing, and if you have actual products on your platform.
Mm-hmm. We have, as one of the, I just wanted to check if my screen is still shared or if well, probably doesn't matter. We have planned to, and this was actually one of the recommendations by the expert group, to establish a platform for an international exchange, a transdisciplinary exchange on lifelong learning, to continue this dialogue that was started. We plan to start such platform next year. We do not, we work on different products, like we host regular webinars, particularly during the COVID-19 crisis. We have hosted a lot of webinars, how lifelong learning can support addressing the challenges of COVID-19. We are currently developing, it's in its very final stage, a handbook for lifelong learning, which targets governments, policymakers, but also people working in institutions that are related to education and lifelong learning, to support them to implement lifelong learning as a principle to education. In line with this handbook, we are currently working on a toolkit, which will be published to have a more practical approach even. Yes, and we are also particularly now related to the field of higher education, currently conducting a research project. It started at the start of this year and will go for 3 years, which is particularly on universities' role in promoting lifelong learning. We have conducted a global survey this autumn, which will close on next Tuesday, 15th. And we also will work on thematic areas related on how universities, for example, promote the building of learning cities, and how they engage with their local communities, how they engage older learners in their learning processes. So yeah, we have a lot of different themes and products that we work on at the moment.
Thank you. I can't see any questions. Maybe Beatriz has some, but in the meantime,
there is one at Q&A. Give a look.
I can't see it. Could you read it, please?
Oh yes, in the absence of a local university, what would you recommend to engender LLL in a community? In the absence of a local university, what would you recommend to generate some local group or to implement the online learning?
I think universities are, of course, not the only institutions that can promote lifelong learning. For example, we can see, particularly in more rural areas, community centers have been very strong proponents of lifelong learning, as they are very close to the people and also usually know very well the needs of the people. Community centers have been very well able, also community libraries, to address the needs. Then I think also schools, adult education centers, but also employers play an important role in embracing lifelong learning, encouraging people to enhance knowledge, to engage in learning processes. So it depends on the local environment, but as I mentioned, lifelong learning goes far beyond the institutionalized learning processes, and there are many different institutions that can promote it.
Edith, I know you're very interested in having education adapted to local cultures, and this was discussed during this meeting. What are your feelings about this? Adapting to local culture.
Well, I mean, to see lifelong learning, of course, to develop, for example, lifelong learning courses. I mean, that also means working on particular subjects. What we can see as one option to find out would be to first, when developing learning programs, to first consult with local communities. You know, this could be through a kind of survey, but also through a consultation process, just bringing people together and involving them in developing programs, so that they are not, this is a bit what I meant before with nothing about us without us, not developing for other people, but together with them. And I think this gives learners or people a different role in a learning process. Then they are mutual partners. There is not one teacher, one institution, and then the learner on the other side, but it is more mutual. And I think so the curricula development, be it in a formal way or be it curricula in the sense of more non-formal education, is quite crucial to address the needs of local communities. Because we cannot always, we can probably not know from the outside, no? It's that's also a way, a kind of colonialism then, to assume always to know better from the outside, no?
And now with the pandemic and so many resources online, have you reconsidered hybrid education?
Yes, of course. I mean, we can see, particularly with universities, in our project on universities, we work closely with the International Association of Universities, and they did a survey in April and May on how the COVID-19 crisis impacted universities. And of course, the impact was very major, like it affected all operational fields of the universities. And of course, they moved from one day to another to online learning. And for some institutions, it worked very well. Others, of course, had major challenges because maybe they didn't have the infrastructure or they didn't have the skills to do it. But I think this will have a long-term impact. I mean, hopefully this crisis will be over soon. But I think this possibility of joining online will stay. And we could also see that a lot of universities provided services to their communities locally or even globally by offering online learning programs for free, just to keep people involved, addressing new target groups. And so I think blended and online learning will certainly stay much more than it was before. And I mean, it's always, a crisis can also be an important driver for innovation. And I think that's what we could also see, yeah.
And finally, the IAU has tried to translate astronomy materials to lots of languages. But I know it's difficult to do this because this culture barrier. How does UIL try to overcome this problem? It's not just enough to translate the knowledge from English to other languages.
Well, I mean, I can only answer that in the documents that we translate. Usually we have 6 main languages that we work in, covering very different cultural spheres. And usually we work with local translators, or at least if we have, let's say, official UNESCO translators, then we would still send the translations to local UNESCO offices in the countries and have them check the translations to make sure particularly that it translates not only literally, but also culturally into this context. So, I mean, at UNESCO, we have quite a good infrastructure or network to ensure this, to include this cultural context. That's maybe an advantage to some other institutions, but that's how we do it. Yeah, we involve the people.
Well, thank you so much. It was great having you here. And I hope pretty soon we'll all have access to lifelong learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.